In this video, we're going to continue where we left off last time with the Struts2 framework. Last time, we were able to download the framework, we got the jar files that we need, and we placed them into the Apache library. So that's all ready to go. And so this time, what we need to do is look at configuring the build path, and then set up the web XML and the struts.xml file that we'll be learning about in this lesson. So once again, in case you haven't already, please get World Manager with Struts2.war from the resources and load that into the Eclipse system. And once you have that in place, what you'll see is that under the web INF, there is a struts setup document, which we've been following along. And again, the stuff from last lesson is in there for the download and the jars that we needed. So if you haven't done that part, please make sure to do that or this next two lessons won't work. So the first thing we need to do is we need to set up our build path to reference those libraries. So let's go ahead and just right click on the project once again and select build path and configure it. And here we'll just add some external jars. There's the 3 ASM jars that we need. We need the 5 commons jars. We need FreeMarker, JavaSys, OGNL, Struts2, Struts2, and Xwork Core. So let's just make sure nothing else is missing. We already have MySQL and JSTL. It won't hurt anything if you reselect them, but we don't need to. And that should be good. So let's go ahead and select OK. And there are all of our jars in place. So now we have those all referenced. The next step that we need to do is configure our web XML file to allow us to have a filter that works with Struts2. So Struts2 will employ a filter, and that filter will essentially intercept the traffic and direct traffic based on what we put in the struts.xml file, which we'll learn about in a moment. So the first thing we do is go ahead and get to our web XML, and you'll see that I've already left the filter in place. So that way we can simply just uncomment it, and you don't have to worry about typing this or copying anything. But what's most important is just to make sure that we are applying this to the entire URL pattern so that everything gets intercepted so the Struts2 framework can do its job across all requests. And we have the class reference correctly with no misspellings. org.apache.struts2.dispatcher.ng.filter.struts prepare and execute filter. That's the class we're referencing. And it should be named World Manager with Struts2, etc. and so on. Everything else in the web XML is exactly as expected as we've had before. Now that we have the Struts2 framework in place, we're actually going to learn about a way that we can build some routing into our system. So what we need is the struts.xml.copy.backup file here. I've put it in the web content area so it wouldn't interfere with anything. It's just a text file or a backup file there, so it's not going to hurt anything. But that way you can just grab it and place it into the source folder by pasting it in there. Now, the nice thing about this is it's all done for you already, so you don't have to worry about that. But the reason that we're putting it into the actual source folder is because when we deploy struts.xml, it needs to be in the web INF classes folder, and that's where these files go from the source. So that's why we want to put the struts.xml right under the source. It doesn't need to be in a package, just under the source folder. And so let's go ahead and open that and look at it. The struts XML has its XML declaration and some doc type information about what this is. But what's most important is you'll see that the struts has its own struts tag. And with that, we have the ability to toggle on and off dev mode. So right now, we'll just leave it in dev mode. If you were going to release this, you'd want to set that value to false, and that will hide some friendly error messages that are showing up in dev mode, which is really nice. Also, what you can see then is we have this package tag. Now, the package tag lines up with the name of the project and extends struts default. And by that, it's just going to say, this is our package directive for World Manager with Struts2. And inside of this package, I'll tell you all the different actions that we need you to take care of when a Struts2 filter intercepts the correct action. So what we can see is then there's a bunch of action tags. And each action has a name. And that name is essentially what's going to be placed on the URL. So this is where our routing becomes really nice. So now instead of having to type in the name of my project /index.jsp, a user can just type in the name of my project /home. And this action will have intercepted it through the struts and direct it automatically to index.jsp. So it's a very nice and friendly way to do some routing through these actions. Pretty basic. You don't have to have anything else. You just place a result. Login, we're going to do the same thing. If you type /login, you'll go to login.jsp. However, what you can see here is that there's a different setup for login user. What we're going to do with login user is we're actually going to intercept from the login page, and we're going to direct the user, rather than to a servlet, to an action. So that will be class com.worldmanager.actions.loginuserAction. And then you'll see that there are multiple results underneath this action tag, and they have different names. So if the result name is success, we'll direct the user to index.jsp. If the result name is error, we'll send them to loginerror.jsp. And if it's input, we'll send them back to login.jsp. So you say, well, success and error, that makes a lot of sense. What is input? Well, input is a way that we can tell the Struts framework that if we have some validation in place on our action and the user hasn't given us all the information we want, they are in error in input, or basically there's more input required. And therefore, we'll direct them back to login.jsp, and it will actually display the input message to them of what's missing, which is really, really nice and handy. So we'll see that in play in our next lesson when we build our action out for the login user. You can see also there are two more actions here, simple actions for sign out and clear user data, which just allows us to have a little nicer, more friendly URL displayed to the user. And that wraps up our look at the configuration of our Struts2 framework. So now we've got it downloaded, we've got it selected, we've got all the jars put in place, we have it configured, our build path is ready to go, our web XML has put the filter in place, and our struts.xml has defined action routing for us.